How did 3,000 men crush 25,000? What mistake doomed Japan's most powerful daimyo? And why did a sudden storm in a narrow valley ignite the unification of an entire nation? On the 12th of June, 1560, in Owari's Okehazama Valley, Oda Nobunaga, just 25 years old, made the boldest gamble of the Sengoku era. Where others fled from overwhelming odds, he charged into them. And in one thunderous afternoon, he changed Japanese history forever. This is the true story of Okehazama, where legends are born and empires fall. The Rising Storm. The year was 1560. Japan was fractured into dozens of warring territories, each ruled by ambitious daimyo hungry for expansion. In the eastern provinces, one man towered above all others, Imagawa Yoshimoto, lord of Suruga, Tutumi, and Mikawa provinces. His domain stretched from the Pacific coast to the mountains, commanding wealth that dwarfed most other clans combined. Yoshimoto wasn't just powerful, he was legitimate. Unlike many upstart warlords, he could trace his lineage directly to the Ashikaga shoguns. Court nobles whispered that he harbored ambitions for the ultimate prize, the shogunate itself. To claim it, he would need to march on Kyoto, the imperial capital. But one obstacle stood in his path, a small but defiant domain called Owari. By 1559, Nobunaga had unified most of Owari, yet he commanded perhaps 2,000 to 3,000 men. Where Yoshimoto embodied tradition and legitimacy, Nobunaga represented chaos and innovation. His own retainers mocked him as the fool of Owari for his disregard of etiquette. The contrast could not have been starker. The established giant versus the reckless upstart. But here's what most people don't realize. Nobunaga had been preparing for this moment his entire life, and he possessed something Yoshimoto fatally underestimated: the fool's gambit. Nobunaga's reputation as a fool masked a calculating intelligence. While other daimyo clung to traditional samurai warfare, he embraced innovation. He leaned heavily on ashigaru, peasant foot soldiers armed with spears and increasingly with Portuguese matchlocks. Others saw dishonor in using commoners. Nobunaga saw an untapped advantage. His Owari domain sat strategically along the Tokaido Road, the main highway linking eastern and western Japan. This position brought wealth through trade taxes, but also painted a target on his back. Yoshimoto needed to control this route to reach Kyoto, and Nobunaga's defiance could no longer be ignored. In early 1560, reports reached Nobunaga's scouts and informants that Yoshimoto was assembling a colossal army, some 25,000 men from 3 provinces, including forces led by the Matsudaira clan of Mikawa. The target was clear: Owari would be crushed and its brash young lord eliminated. Most of Nobunaga's senior retainers urged surrender. The mathematics were brutal: 8 to 1 odds at minimum, possibly 10 to 1. But Nobunaga had built something unique: a robust network of scouts, merchants, monks, and sympathetic samurai that kept him closely apprised of Imagawa movements without tipping his hand. This invisible network would prove more valuable than thousands of soldiers. The march to destiny. On the 19th of May, 1560, Yoshimoto's massive army began its westward march. The procession stretched for miles, mounted samurai in gleaming armor, ashigaru carrying banners and spears, supply trains laden with rice and weapons. Yoshimoto himself rode in splendor, his war fan bearing the Imagawa crest to inspire his men and intimidate his foes. The Imagawa plan was textbook. Take Nobunaga's border fortresses in sequence: Washizu, then Marun, then Kiyosu itself. Each would be offered terms: surrender and live, or resist and be annihilated. It was the kind of overwhelming siege warfare that had worked for centuries. But Nobunaga's scouts reported crucial details. The army moved slowly, burdened by its size and lulled by early victories. Yoshimoto treated the campaign like a procession, with celebration and relaxed discipline spreading through the ranks. Confidence was drifting into overconfidence. More importantly, Yoshimoto chose to oversee operations personally from Dengaku-hazama, a valley in Okehazama. The ground offered commanding views but poor escape routes. For most generals, a sensible choice. For Nobunaga, an irresistible opening. Here's the critical part. Yoshimoto believed his overwhelming numbers guaranteed victory. Nobunaga recognized that very size as the Imagawa's fatal weakness. The forts fall. By the 12th of June, the Imagawa vanguard seized Washizu and Marune. At Marune, Commander Sakuma Morishige was shot and killed by concentrated arquebus fire as Matsudaira Motoyasu, later known as Tokugawa Ieyasu, pressed the siege. With both strongholds gone, the road to Kiyosu seemed wide open. Confident, Yoshimoto established his headquarters at Dengaku-Hazama. Victory felt inevitable. Nobunaga's troops appeared to be in retreat, and scouts confirmed what they wanted to see: an enemy in disarray. But Nobunaga had planned for this. He chose not to commit his main force to relieve the forts, preserving strength while the Imagawa advanced into ground he knew well. Meanwhile, Nobunaga gathered about 3,000 men and slipped them through lesser-used mountain paths under cover of haze and forest. Guided by locals, they reached the hills overlooking Dengaku-Hazama. The weather was turning oppressive. Clouds gathered and humidity hung heavy in the valley. Yoshimoto's army, already relaxed after easy victories, was about to face the storm of its life. The storm breaks. Around early afternoon, nature intervened. A sudden thunderstorm, as many chronicles relate, swept across Okehazama. Sheets of rain lashed the valley, turning banners to rags and drowning signals in thunder. Soldiers scattered for shelter beneath trees and ditches. Order dissolved into confusion. This was Nobunaga's moment. From the hills above the Imagawa camp, he led his 3,000 men in a furious charge straight at Yoshimoto's headquarters. To the soaked and disoriented Imagawa troops, it seemed as if warriors emerged from the storm itself. The psychological shock was devastating. An army that had never known defeat crumbled under the chaos. But Nobunaga's real objective wasn't the rank and file. It was Yoshimoto himself. His scouts had tracked the daimyo's habits, and Nobunaga knew where his enemy would be sheltering. Here's what makes this moment legendary. Nobunaga didn't just gamble on surprise. He gambled on decapitating the Imagawa army at its heart. The death of a giant. At first, Yoshimoto mistook the commotion for squabbling among his own men. Sheltering in a small shrine with his personal guard, he believed the storm had simply unsettled his soldiers. By the time Oda warriors burst in, realization came too late. The Imagawa elite fought desperately but were scattered and unprepared. Amid the chaos, Yoshimoto was cut down. According to widely cited accounts, the fatal blows came from Mori Shinsuke and Hatsutori Koheta, Oda retainers who may not have recognized their target until they saw his distinctive armor and war fan. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Word of Yoshimoto's death spread like wildfire. The Imagawa host, numbering perhaps 25,000, broke apart in panic. What followed wasn't an orderly retreat. It was collapse. Weapons, supplies, and comrades were abandoned as the once invincible army disintegrated. The war machine built over 3 generations was destroyed in an afternoon. The birth of a legend. News of the impossible victory raced across Japan. In Kyoto, the court was stunned. An obscure lord with 3,000 men had destroyed the strongest daimyo in the land. But here's what most people don't realize. Okehazama wasn't just a fluke of weather and chance. It marked a new style of warfare. Traditional samurai honor, built on ceremony and single combat, was eclipsed by intelligence networks, coordinated tactics, and ruthless pragmatism. The political fallout was immediate. The Imagawa domain splintered. Long-serving vassals switched allegiances. And most importantly, Matsudaira Motoyasu asserted his independence later in 1560, then forged the Kiyosu alliance with Nobunaga in 1562. Overnight, Nobunaga transformed from the Fool of Owari into a power on the national stage. Other warlords studied his methods, realizing Japan had entered a new age. The legend of Okehazama was born. The ripple effect. Okehazama reshaped Japan's military and political landscape. Nobunaga's victory proved that tradition could be toppled, that merit and innovation could triumph over bloodline and sheer size. Firearms and disciplined ashigaru had already spread since the 1540s. But Okehazama spotlighted how decisively Nobunaga wielded them. Leaders began to consider bold strikes against enemy command posts rather than grinding sieges. The Imagawa clan never recovered. Their lands were divided, with Nobunaga absorbing key territories to fuel future campaigns. His name alone began to inspire fear and respect. Enemies dreaded his audacity before swords were ever drawn. The battle also revealed Nobunaga's defining trait. He was willing to take colossal risks, but only after calculating them with precision. A balance of daring and discipline that made him one of the most formidable figures in Japanese history. The unification begins. The decade following Okehazama proved that Nobunaga's gamble had not been luck. He expanded steadily, forming alliances with former Imagawa vassals. Most critically, his bond with Tokugawa Ieyasu gave him a partner who would one day rule Japan. But Nobunaga's ambitions went beyond territory. He broke the power of militant Buddhist monasteries, disrupted entrenched trade monopolies, and elevated merchants and artisans based on ability rather than lineage. These reforms won him bitter enemies, but also forged a new class of loyal supporters. Militarily, Nobunaga pioneered organized matchlock units, new siege methods, and redesigned fortifications. Warfare in Japan would never be the same. By 1568, just 8 years after Okehazama, Nobunaga marched on Kyoto itself. The once mocked fool was now a national power broker, and the path to unification had begun. The Battle of Okehazama remains one of history's greatest military upsets, but its true significance lies in what it represented. The moment medieval Japan began transforming into a unified nation, Nobunaga proved that innovation could overcome tradition and that intelligence and daring could defeat overwhelming force. The young upstart who gambled everything on an impossible charge would go on to control half of Japan before his death in 1582. His successors, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu, would complete the unification he began, laying the foundations of modern Japan. If you enjoyed this cinematic journey into one of Japan's most pivotal battles, hit like to help others discover it. Drop a comment with the samurai stories you want to see next. And don't forget to subscribe to Japan Rewind for more untold tales of warriors, castles, and legends. Until next time, sayonara.